So, guys, for the past several months, one question has been following the Dallas Cowboys everywhere. Is George Pickens going to get a long-term extension or not? Every week, there seemed to be a new rumor, a new report, or a different prediction about what Jerry Jones was going to do. A lot of fans and even NFL insiders were expecting some kind of major announcement before the franchise tag deadline. Well, now that the deadline has finally passed, Jerry Jones' decision is pretty clear. So today, let's break down what he decided and what it could mean for George Pickens' future with the Dallas Cowboys. What's up, Cowboys Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, the deadline for franchise tag players to actually get a long-term deal done, which was 15th of July, has now passed, and George Pickens didn't get one. This is not some new twist. It is exactly what this front office has been signaling for months at this point. There was never a real push from Dallas to lock him up early, and now it is locked in stone. Pickens will play out the 2026 season on his franchise tag, and that number is fully guaranteed at $27.3 million. That figure was already set the moment he signed the tender back in the spring, so nothing changes there. What changes now is the certainty. Before, there was still a small window where a deal could theoretically happen. That window is officially closed for this year. So, the real question fans should be asking is simple. Did the Cowboys handle this the right way? Because there are two ways to look at it. On one hand, you could argue they strung this out for months without ever intending to pay him, letting the rumors and the speculation drag on longer than they needed to. On the other hand, you could argue they were honest from the jump. They told him and his camp exactly where things stood. And they avoided the kind of messy public back and forth we have seen with other players on this roster in the past. Stephen Jones made it clear that Dallas has no plans to trade Pickens, and both Jerry Jones and head coach Brian Schottenheimer sat down with him directly to explain the decision face-to-face. That kind of face-to-face conversation matters more than people give it credit for. Pickens himself said it mattered to him, that he just wanted to be told the truth straight up, instead of being left guessing about his own future. Now let's talk about the holdout question, because I know that is what a lot of you are thinking about right now. Is there any chance Pickens sits out camp or holds in like we have seen from other guys on this roster before? Based on everything coming out of Dallas, the answer is no. Pickens has already reported to mandatory minicamp back in June, and by all accounts, he has bought into this locker room completely. He has talked about throwing with Dak Prescott in the offseason, about building chemistry with his teammates, about wanting to bring this franchise its first Super Bowl in decades. Those are not the words of a guy who is about to sit out training camp in protest. And honestly, once he signed that tender, whatever leverage he had walked out the door with it. There is no version of this where holding out helps him get a better deal down the line. It would only hurt his value in the eyes of the front office and damage his relationship with the coaching staff. So, it means whatever trade rumors we were listening before, I think we can finally put to rest, at least for now. Every few weeks, somebody floats a hypothetical trade destination for Pickens, but the math just does not work in his favor. Best case scenario, if he gets traded, he is still playing on the exact same franchise tag salary, except now he is learning a brand new offense in a matter of weeks with a quarterback who was probably a downgrade from Dak Prescott. That is not a win for him in almost any realistic situation you can imagine. The only scenario where a trade starts to make a little bit of sense is if Dallas falls apart in October, injuries start piling up, and the front office decides to be the one shopping him around instead of him asking out. Even then, we are talking about a very small possibility, not something you should genuinely expect to happen this season. So, what does Pickens actually need to do from here on out? Honestly, the path forward is pretty simple when you break it down. He needs to go be a professional, stay out of trouble off the field, and put up big numbers again just like he did in year one with this franchise. If he repeats anything close to last season's production, somewhere in that range of 90+, catches close to 1,400 yards and around 8 or 9 touchdowns, he is going to be right back in the conversation as one of the best receivers in this entire league. Jerry Jones himself said it plainly at the Combine, that this team wants Pickens to be part of their future and that there is a lot of weight behind that statement. The relationship right now is described as smooth, almost like everyone involved just wants to get through this season without unnecessary drama and let the production do the talking on the field. It also helps that this situation is different from some of the other contract battles this roster has gone through recently. Pickens only has 1 year of tape with Dallas, unlike Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb, who had built up years of production before their extensions got done. Before landing in Dallas, his numbers with Pittsburgh bounced around quite a bit, and last year was easily his best season as a professional. So, there is a fair argument that the front office simply wants a bigger sample size before committing major money, rather than this being some kind of personal issue with Pickens specifically. Now, let's talk money for a second, because this is where things get really interesting looking ahead to 2027. If Dallas decides to tag Pickens again next offseason, that number jumps to somewhere around $32.8 million, which works out to about 100% of this year's salary. If they ended up going with a third tag after that, the price would climb even higher than that. Basic math tells you that if Pickens' camp sits down to negotiate an extension next year, they are going to point straight at those tag numbers as the floor of the conversation, not the ceiling. And that is before you even factor in what the open market would realistically pay him if he ever actually hit true free agency after another strong season in this offense. But here is the something that should worry Cowboys fans just a little bit. CeeDee Lamb is already making $34 million a year, and that ranks third among all receivers league-wide right now. Paying two receivers at the very top of the market on top of Dak Prescott still sitting near the top of the quarterback market and Tyler Smith being the highest paid interior lineman at his position starts to get complicated fast from a salary cap standpoint. That is the real reason behind the hesitation here, if you ask me. It is not that the front office does not value Pickens as a player. It is that the cap only stretches so far, and this roster already has a lot of expensive pieces locked into long-term deals. Now think about what happens if Pickens goes out this year and puts together another huge season. His market is not just going to compare with CeeDee Lamb anymore at that point. We are talking about him potentially chasing numbers closer to what the elite receivers around this league are getting paid, somewhere in that $35 million range annually, with guaranteed money pushing up toward $80 million or more. Players who reach that kind of production almost never actually make it to true free agency because teams tend to lock them up well before it gets that far. So, the real leverage for Pickens comes next offseason, not this one, and everybody involved seems to understand that already. Now, here is what I think how all of this plays out from here. I think there is a real chance that by next February, Pickens and his camp adopt a pay me or free me approach with this front office. If he balls out again this season and the Cowboys are winning games, I do not blame him one single bit for pushing hard for a long-term deal or exploring a trade if Dallas will not meet his number at that point. And remember, we got some insider news a few days ago that Pickens actually tied for a trade, but no other team showed real interest in him. Like definitely, if the Cowboys will not get Goot return, they are not going to trade him. But after this season, everything will change, but it all depends entirely on health and performance between now and then. If he gets hurt or has a down year for whatever reason, this entire conversation changes completely and probably in his favor to stay put. But if everything breaks the way it looks right now, expect this exact same storyline to resurface again next offseason, except with a whole lot more money sitting on the table for everyone involved. I also want to touch on why this whole process felt so much quieter compared to some of the contract drama we have watched unfold with this franchise before. People kept trying to draw comparisons between Pickens and Micah Parsons, mostly because they share the same agent, David Mulugeta. But the situations are honestly nothing alike. Parsons had years of elite production and a much bigger track record before things got messy last year during the whole Parsons trade situation. Pickens is still building that resume in Dallas. On top of that, the conversations this time around were described as professional and cordial, which is a pretty big difference from how things played out with Parsons. So while the outcome looks similar on the surface, no long-term deal before the deadline, the process behind it was handled with a lot more communication this time around. And that matters for how training camp is going to feel over the next few weeks. It is also worth remembering that no other team was willing to step up and pay Pickens anywhere close to that $33 to $35 million range this offseason, even with trade calls reportedly going around during the draft. That tells you something about where the league values him right now compared to where his camp wants him valued. It is not that teams do not respect his talent. It is that giving up draft capital and paying top-of-market money for a receiver with one big season on his resume is a tough sell for most front offices. That is part of why Pickens ultimately signed his tender and chose to play this out in Dallas. And look, if this ends up being a champagne problem down the road where the Cowboys have two genuinely elite receivers and have to figure out how to pay them both. That is a situation plenty of fan bases around this league would trade for in a heartbeat. Having CeeDee Lamb and Pickens on the outside, throwing to Dak Prescott, gives this offense a ceiling that most defenses simply cannot match on paper. The front office just has to be smart about how they build around that cap number moving forward, and based on how they have handled this situation so far, I trust them to at least have a plan in place before next offseason rolls around. For this season, though, the drama should be behind us completely. Pickens is here, he has reported to the team, and every single indication out of Frisco points to him showing up ready to play good football from day one of camp. I genuinely believe he ends up staying in Dallas long-term if he keeps performing anywhere near this level. But the Cowboys front office is going to have to be prepared to pay up eventually if they truly want to keep both of their star receivers happy at the same time. That is a good problem to have compared to most rosters around this league, but it is still a problem that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones will have to solve sooner rather than later.